The great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with worried voices. Representatives from dozens of star systems sat around the massive circular table, their different faces showing the same fear. In the center of the room, Ambassador Thys stood on shaking legs, her blue skin pale with exhaustion. The Zilani people were dying. For 3 months, the Corac Empire had been burning their worlds. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were now smoking ruins. Millions of peaceful Zilani had already been killed or taken as slaves. "Please," Thys said, her voice breaking. "My people cannot fight back. We have never been warriors. We are artists, teachers, healers. The Corac are destroying everything we have built." Around the table, alien heads turned away. The reptilian Vorthan ambassador shuffled his papers. The insect-like Chitik representative clicked nervously. No one wanted to meet Thys's desperate eyes. Council leader Szeth, a tall gray being with 4 arms, spoke carefully. "Ambassador Thys, we understand your pain. But the Corac Empire has conquered 12 star systems. They have weapons we cannot match. Their warriors know no fear and show no mercy. Then what am I supposed to do?" Thys cried. "Watch my children die? Let my people become extinct?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to say it. The Zilani were gentle creatures who had never hurt anyone. They made beautiful art and wrote poetry that could make even the hardest soldiers cry. But gentleness did not stop plasma cannons. Slowly, the Chitik ambassador raised one of his thin arms. His voice was like the sound of wind through leaves. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Several representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "What option?" Thys asked. "Earth," the Chitik said. And several beings actually moved away from the table. The word hung in the air like poison. Earth, the death world. Home to the apex predators. The planet where everything tried to kill everything else. And somehow one species had climbed to the top and kept climbing. Thys had heard the stories. Every being in the galaxy had. Humans were monsters, wearing the faces of civilized creatures. They came from a world where gravity was so strong it would crush most aliens, where the weather could kill, where the very air burned with oxygen. They had fought their way up the food chain by being more violent, more clever, and more stubborn than anything else on their horrible planet. And then they had reached the stars. The first contact with humans had been peaceful enough. They seemed friendly, even helpful. They traded fairly and followed galactic law. But then the Draken pirates had attacked a human colony. The response had been swift and terrible. Human warships appeared out of nowhere, moving faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The pirates who survived spoke of creatures who fought without honor, who used every dirty trick possible, who never gave up even when facing certain death. The human military moved like a pack of hungry predators, and they had destroyed the entire Draken fleet in less than 2 days. After that, humans had been left alone. They kept to themselves mostly, trading with a few species, but always watching the galaxy with cold, calculating eyes. Everyone knew they were building something in their home systems. Ships, weapons, plans for wars that might never come. The humans had joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago, but they rarely spoke. When they did talk, their words were always polite and reasonable. But there was something behind their eyes that made other species nervous. A hunger. A readiness for violence that never quite went away. "The humans," Thys whispered. "But they are monsters." "Yes," said the Vorthan ambassador. "But they are also the only ones strong enough to stop the Corac." Szeth held up one of his hands for silence. "Ambassador Thys, you must understand what you would be asking. The humans do not fight wars the way we do. They do not believe in honor or fair combat. They fight to win, and they will use any method necessary." "What does that mean?" Thys asked. The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, the elderly Altarian representative spoke. Her voice was soft, but filled with fear. "It means they will become more terrible than the enemy. They will do things that will give you nightmares. They will make the Corac afraid, yes, but they will also make you afraid. And when the war is over, you will have to live in a galaxy where everyone knows you called upon the monsters of Earth." Thys looked around the room at all the faces watching her. Some showed pity. Others showed fear. A few showed curiosity, wondering what choice she would make. She thought about her homeworld, the beautiful crystal cities that had taken centuries to grow, the gardens where her people wrote their poetry and sang their songs, the schools where children learned to paint with light and music. All of it was burning now. The Corac were not just conquering the Zelani, they were erasing them. Soon there would be nothing left of her people, except scattered refugees hiding in distant stars. "I formally request aid from the human government," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Whatever the cost." The words seemed to echo in the great hall. Several representatives actually stood up and left the room. Others whispered prayers in their own languages. Everyone knew that something had changed in the galaxy. Szeth nodded slowly. "The Council will send your request to Earth immediately. May whatever gods you believe in have mercy on us all." As the meeting ended and the representatives filed out, Thys remained standing in the center of the room. She was no longer shaking. She had made her choice. She had asked the monsters of Earth for help. Now she could only wait to see what monsters looked like when they came to save you. The human ships arrived 3 days later. This alone made half the Council nervous. Earth was 47 light-years away. Yet somehow, the humans had received the message and traveled to the Council station faster than most species could send a reply. Admiral Sarah Chen walked into the Council chambers like she owned them. She was not tall, but something about the way she moved made everyone step aside. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her uniform was clean and neat. She looked perfectly normal, which somehow made her more frightening. Behind her came her team. A weapons specialist with scars on his hands. An intelligence officer who smiled too much. A communications expert who never seemed to blink. They all looked human enough, but there was something predatory in their movements, like wolves pretending to be dogs. "Council Leader Szeth," Admiral Chen said, nodding politely. "We received your message. We came as quickly as we could." The way she said it made it sound like traveling 47 light-years in 3 days was perfectly reasonable. Several council members exchanged worried glances. Szeth gestured toward the center of the room where Ambassador Thys waited. "Admiral, Ambassador Thys has requested military assistance for her people. Perhaps she should explain the situation." Chen turned to look at Thys. Her eyes were brown and seemed warm enough, but Thys felt like she was being examined by something that could decide whether she was prey or not. "Ambassador," Chen said softly, "tell me what happened." For the next 10 minutes, Thys explained everything. The Corac attacks, the burning cities, the millions of dead, the complete inability of her people to fight back. As she spoke, Chen listened without moving, barely even blinking. When Thys finished, Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Are they targeting civilians?" "Yes," Thys said. "They kill anyone who cannot work as a slave. Children, elderly, anyone weak or sick. They burn our art, destroy our books, erase our culture. They want to make sure nothing remains of who we were." Something changed in Chen's face. It was subtle, but suddenly the temperature in the room felt 10 degrees colder. Around the table, representatives leaned back in their chairs without realizing why. Chen looked at her team. The weapons specialist cracked his knuckles. The intelligence officer stopped smiling. The communications expert finally blinked. Once. Slowly. "We'll handle this," Chen said. The simplicity of her words was terrifying. No conditions. No negotiations. No discussion of payment or political favors. Just 4 words That sounded like a death sentence for someone. Council leader Zeth cleared his throat. Admiral, perhaps we should discuss terms. What does Earth require in exchange for military assistance? Chen looked at him like he had asked a very strange question. Require? They're killing innocent people. That's all we need to know. But surely you want something in return, the Vorthan ambassador said nervously. Territory? Resources? Trade agreements? No, Chen said. We want the killing to stop. The room fell silent. This was not how galactic politics worked. Species did not simply offer military aid without expecting something in return. Wars were expensive. Soldiers died. There had to be profit in it somewhere. The Altarian representative spoke carefully. Admiral Chen, we appreciate Earth's willingness to help. But the Corac Empire is very powerful. They have advanced weapons and experienced warriors. Perhaps a smaller intervention would be wiser. Economic pressure, diplomatic solutions. Chen's smile was sharp enough to cut metal. Ma'am, with respect, diplomatic solutions work when both sides want to talk. The Corac don't want to talk. They want to kill, conquer, and enslave. There's only one language they understand. And what language is that? Zeth asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Violence, Chen said simply. Fortunately, we're very good at speaking it. The human team began to leave. But this called out. Admiral Chen. Wait. How long do you think this will take? Chen paused at the door. How long has the Corac Empire existed? About 200 years, Thys said. Then it's taken them 200 years too long to learn basic manners, Chen said. Don't worry, Ambassador. We'll make sure they learn quickly. After the humans left, the council chamber erupted in nervous chatter. Some representatives worried about what the humans would do. Others worried about what would happen to the balance of power in the galaxy if the humans won too easily. But it was the Chittic ambassador who said what everyone was thinking. Did you see how they moved? How they looked at each other when she mentioned civilians being targeted? What about it? Zeth asked. They didn't get angry, the Chittic said, his voice barely a whisper. Anger is hot. Anger makes you stupid. What I saw in their eyes was cold, calculating. They heard that innocent people were dying, and they just decided to fix it. Like deciding to repair a broken machine. The Vorthan ambassador shivered. What have we done? 8. Thys stood alone in the center of the room after everyone else had gone. Through the great windows, she could see the human fleet preparing to leave. Their ships were sleek and dark, built for speed and stealth rather than impressive displays. They moved through space like sharks through water. She thought about Chen's words. We'll handle this. So simple. So final. The Chittic ambassador had been right. The humans had not seemed angry about what was happening to the Zelani people. They had seemed like professionals who had just been given a job to do. Somehow, that was much more frightening than anger would have been. As the human ships disappeared into hyperspace, Thys whispered a prayer for her people. And then, almost without realizing it, she whispered another prayer for the Corac, because she was beginning to understand that the galaxy's monsters were going hunting, and she was no longer sure who really needed mercy. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Corac supply convoy to Sector 7 simply vanished. General Krex stood in the command center of the dreadnought Bloodclaw, staring at the empty space where 16 cargo ships should have been. His red eyes glowed with anger as he turned to his communications officer. What do you mean they disappeared? He growled. Sir, they jumped into hyperspace on schedule 3 days ago. The route was clear. No enemy ships detected. They should have arrived yesterday, but... The officer's voice trailed off as he checked his screens again. Nothing, sir. No distress signals, no debris, nothing. Krex smashed his fist into the control panel. The Corac were proud warriors who had conquered worlds through direct combat. They understood battle, honor, and strength. They did not understand how 16 armed cargo ships could simply cease to exist. "Send a search patrol," he ordered. The search patrol never came back. Over the next 2 weeks, the reports kept coming. Outposts that stopped responding to communications. Patrol ships that launched and never returned. Weapons facilities that suffered mysterious explosions. Each incident was small, almost unnoticeable on its own, but together they painted a picture that made even veteran Corac warriors nervous. Someone was hunting them. The humans had declared war. But where were their fleets? Where were the massive battles? The honor duels between warriors? The glorious combat that decided the fate of empires? Instead, there were only shadows and silence, and the growing feeling that invisible predators were circling closer. Commander Vash paced the bridge of his battlecruiser, watching the sensor displays with growing frustration. His ship was one of the finest in the Corac fleet, equipped with weapons that could destroy cities and armor that could withstand almost any attack. But how could he fight an enemy he could not see? "Sir," his sensor officer reported, "we're picking up a distress signal from Outpost Gamma 7. "Put it through," Vash ordered. The voice that came through the speakers was filled with terror. "This is Gamma 7. We're under attack. They came out of nowhere. Our shields are down. Our weapons are offline. How are they doing this? They're not even—" The transmission cut to static. "Set course for Gamma 7, Vash commanded. "Full speed." When they arrived, they found the outpost intact, but completely dark. No power, no life signs, no movement at all. The massive facility looked like a dead whale floating in space. "Send a boarding team," Vash ordered, though every instinct told him this was a trap. The boarding team found the outpost's crew alive, but unconscious, scattered throughout the station like they had simply fallen asleep at their posts. Every computer had been wiped clean. Every weapon had been disabled with surgical precision. In the command center, someone had left a message written on the wall in Corac script. "Stop killing innocents. This is your only warning." No Corac warrior had ever seen their own language written so perfectly by an alien hand. The implications were terrifying. Vash retreated immediately. But as his ship jumped to hyperspace, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. For just a moment, his sensors had detected another ship. Human design. It had been following them the entire time, close enough to touch, and they had never known it was there. The psychological warfare was methodical and brutal. Corac commanders began to crack under the pressure of fighting an enemy they could not understand. Their soldiers, bred for direct combat and raised on stories of glorious battle, found themselves jumping at shadows and suspecting every empty corridor. General Krex called an emergency meeting of his command staff. The holographic conference room was filled with the images of his best officers. But their confidence was shattered. These were warriors who had conquered star systems, and now they looked like frightened children. "Report," Krex demanded. 17 outposts have gone dark," Admiral Thane said, his voice hollow. 4 supply convoys have vanished. We've lost contact with 3 patrol fleets, and we still have not seen a single human ship in direct combat. "They're like ghosts," Captain Zor added. "They strike without warning, disable everything, and disappear before we can respond. Our best tracking systems can't find them. It's like they know our technology better than we do." Krex slammed his fist on the table. "They are cowards, honorless scavengers. When we find them, we will crush them like insects." "Sir," Admiral Thane said quietly. The words hung in the air like a curse. For the first time in 200 years of conquest, the Corac Empire was afraid. That night, Krex's own flagship suffered a catastrophic system failure. Every computer crashed simultaneously. The engines went offline. Life support flickered. For 3 hours, the most powerful warship in the Corac fleet drifted helplessly through space. When the systems came back online, they found a data packet waiting in their communication array. It contained detailed information about every Corac military operation, every troop movement, every secret weapon. Information that should have been impossible for the humans to obtain. But worse than the intelligence breach was the note attached to the data. We know where all of you are. We know what you're planning. We know your weaknesses. Stop the genocide, or we will stop you. The choice is yours. Crex stared at the message for a long time. Around him, his crew worked frantically to determine how the humans had infiltrated their most secure systems. But he already knew the answer. They hadn't just infiltrated the systems. They had been inside the Corac network all along, watching, learning, preparing. While the Empire had been focused on conquering primitive worlds, the humans had been studying them, like specimens in a laboratory. For the first time in his military career, General Crex felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The humans were not fighting a war. They were conducting an extermination. Clinical, methodical, and absolutely inevitable. They moved through space like antibodies through a bloodstream, identifying threats and neutralizing them with surgical precision. The Corac had always believed that strength came from superior weapons and warrior courage. Now they were learning that true strength came from superior intelligence, planning, and the willingness to do absolutely anything necessary to protect the innocent. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, human ships continued their hunt. Silent, patient, unstoppable. And with every passing hour, the Corac Empire grew smaller. The interrogation room on the human ship was nothing like what Captain Grix had expected. He had prepared himself for torture, for pain, for the barbaric methods that civilized beings whispered the humans used on their prisoners. Instead, he sat at a simple metal table, across from a young human woman who offered him water and spoke in perfect Corac. "I'm Lieutenant Sarah Park," she said, her voice calm and professional. "I'd like to ask you some questions about your unit's activities on Zilani Prime." Grix laughed, though the sound was bitter. "I will tell you nothing, human monster. I am a warrior of the Empire." Park nodded as if she had expected this response. She placed a small device on the table between them. "That's your choice, Captain. But I think you should see this first." The device projected a three-dimensional image into the air. Grix recognized it immediately. The residential sector of Zilani Prime's capital city. But something was wrong with the picture. Where there should have been tall, graceful buildings, there was only smoking rubble. Where there should have been parks and gardens, there were only craters. "This was taken yesterday," Park said quietly. The image shifted, zooming in on specific areas. Grix saw the remains of a school, its colorful walls now blackened and collapsed. A medical center, reduced to twisted metal and scattered debris. A nursery where young Zilani had learned their first songs, now nothing but ash. "Standard military targets," Grix said, but his voice lacked conviction. Park touched the device, and the image changed again. Now it showed bodies. Zilani civilians, their blue skin pale in death. Children who had been running when the bombs fell. Elderly beings who had tried to shield the young with their own bodies. "This is what your standard military operation accomplished," Park said. 17,000 civilians dead in one afternoon. Grix stared at the images, his confidence cracking. This was war, he told himself. Casualties were expected. The weak died, so the strong could survive. It was the natural order of the universe. But as the images continued to cycle through the aftermath of the bombardment, something cold settled in his stomach. A Zilani mother still holding her infant. A teacher who had died trying to protect his students. Families huddled together in their final moments. They resisted. Grix said weakly. They harbored enemies of the Empire. Park's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes became very dangerous. "Captain, the Zilani are pacifists. They don't even have weapons. Their idea of resistance is writing protest poetry. She touched the device again. This time, the image showed a Corac datapad, with military orders written in Grix's own handwriting. Orders that specified targeting civilian centers to break enemy morale and eliminate cultural resistance. "These are your orders, aren't they?" Park asked. Grix said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Park leaned back in her chair. "Captain, my species has a saying. When you hunt monsters, be careful not to become one yourself. But you never hunted monsters. Did you? You hunted innocence. You became the monster." For the next hour, Park showed him evidence that human intelligence had gathered from across the Corac Empire. Not just military targets destroyed, but systematic campaigns to erase entire cultures. Slave markets, where Zilani children were sold like livestock. Processing centers where civilians were worked to death in weapons factories. Mass graves on a dozen worlds. It wasn't conquest. It was genocide. "Why are you showing me this?" Grix asked finally. "Because I want you to understand why we're going to destroy your empire," Park said simply. "Not for territory, not for resources. Because you're a cancer, and we're the cure." Meanwhile, on the liberated Zilani worlds, something impossible was happening. The same humans who had methodically dismantled the Corac war machine were showing a completely different side of their nature. Medical Officer James Chen knelt beside a wounded Zilani child, his large human hands surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the girl's injuries. She had been hiding in the ruins for 3 days, too scared to come out even after the bombardment stopped. "It's okay," he said softly, using the simple Zilani words he had learned. "You're safe now." The child looked up at him with large, frightened eyes. She had heard the stories about humans, about their violence, and their terrible weapons. But this human's touch was careful, and his voice was kind. "My parents," she whispered. Chen's expression grew sad. "I'm sorry, little one. They're gone. But you're not alone anymore." Around them, the rescue operation continued. Human soldiers carried elderly Zilani out of collapsed buildings with infinite patience. Engineers worked around the clock to restore power and clean water. Cooks prepared foods that Zilani could eat, studying their dietary needs to make sure everyone was properly fed. It was the same across all the liberated worlds. Humans, who had fought with ruthless efficiency against the Corac, became gentle protectors when dealing with civilians. They built temporary shelters that somehow felt like homes. They set up schools and hospitals. They helped bury the dead with dignity and respect. Ambassador Thys stood in the ruins of her world's greatest library, watching human technicians work to recover damaged books and art pieces. The Corac had burned most of the collection, but these humans treated each recovered fragment like a precious treasure. "Why are they doing this?" she asked Admiral Chen, who had come to oversee the restoration personally. "Because it matters," Chen replied. "Your culture, your history, your art. It's irreplaceable. The Corac tried to erase it because they knew that's how you truly kill a people. They destroy not just lives, but memory." A young human engineer approached them, carefully carrying a damaged sculpture. "Admiral, we found this in the basement archives. I think we can restore most of it." The sculpture was a Zilani family. Parents and children intertwined in an eternal embrace. It had been a symbol of their peaceful nature, their love for each other, and their world. Chen took the sculpture with hands that had planned the destruction of the Corac fleet, now handling it like it was made of spider webs. "Make it perfect," she told the engineer. "These people deserve to have their beauty back." As news of the human actions spread throughout the galaxy, confusion replaced fear. Species that had expected the monsters of Earth to demand tribute or territorial concessions instead watched them spend their own resources to rebuild worlds they had never seen before. The Vorthan ambassador contacted his government with a message that would be remembered in diplomatic circles for generations. "I don't think we understand humans at all. They're not what we thought they were. They're not conquerors. They're guardians. But perhaps the most telling moment came when a group of Zilani children, orphaned by the war, approached a squad of human soldiers. The soldiers had been resting after a 30-hour shift clearing rubble and rescuing survivors. The children had brought drawings they had made, simple pictures showing humans and Zilani standing together under bright suns. At the bottom of each drawing, written in the careful script of young students, were 2 words in Galactic Common. Thank you. The soldiers, who had demolished an empire without showing a hint of emotion, sat in the ruins of an alien city and cried. The surrender came on a Tuesday. General Corac stood in the ruins of his command center, surrounded by the broken dreams of an empire that had lasted 200 years. His fleet was gone. His armies were scattered. His weapons were useless against an enemy that struck from shadows and disappeared like smoke. But it was not the military defeat that broke him. It was the message the humans had sent to every Corac world simultaneously, broadcast on every communication channel, displayed on every screen. The message was simple: a compilation of everything the Corac Empire had done to innocent peoples. The slave markets, the mass graves, the systematic destruction of entire cultures, all of it documented with brutal precision. And at the end, a single line of text. This ends now. Not a demand for surrender. Not terms for negotiation. Just a statement of fact. The genocide would stop, because the humans had decided it would stop. Within hours, Corac worlds across the Empire began surrendering without being asked. Not to avoid destruction, but because their own people had seen the evidence of what their empire had become. The proud warrior culture that had built itself on conquest found itself looking in a mirror and not liking what it saw. Corac activated his personal communicator for the last time as the supreme commander of the Corac Empire. This is General Corac to Admiral Chen. I formally surrender all Corac forces. Unconditionally. The response came immediately, in perfect Corac. Surrender accepted. Your people will be treated with dignity and respect. The same dignity you denied others. The victory ceremony was held on the Galactic Council Station. Representatives from dozens of worlds came to witness the end of the Corac Empire and the beginning of whatever would come next. Admiral Chen stood at the podium, still wearing her simple uniform, still looking like an ordinary human who happened to have dismantled a galactic empire in 6 weeks. Behind her, the human fleet waited in perfect formation. Sleek ships that had proven themselves more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Ambassador Thys approached the podium with a case full of data chips. Admiral Chen, she said formally, the Zilani Federation offers Earth territorial control over 17 star systems, mining rights to 47 worlds, and exclusive trading agreements worth trillions of galactic credits. It is inadequate payment for what you have done for us, but it is all we have. The hall was silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. This was when the humans would reveal their true intentions, when they would claim their reward for becoming the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Chen looked at the offered data chips for a long moment. Then she smiled. We don't want your worlds or your wealth, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. We came because someone was hurting innocent people, and we could stop it. That's what we do. The words hit the assembly like a physical blow. Several ambassadors actually stepped backward. This was not how galactic politics worked. This was not how power behaved. But surely you want something, Council Leader Zeth said, confusion clear in his voice. Your military expenses alone must have been enormous. Your soldiers risked their lives. Your ships. Our ships are going home, Chen interrupted gently. Our soldiers are already helping rebuild the worlds that were damaged. As for expenses, we consider it money well spent. The Vorthan ambassador found his voice first. Admiral, forgive me, but I don't understand. You have just proven that humanity possesses the most powerful military in the galaxy. You could demand anything, control any trade route, conquer any world. Why are you walking away?" Chen was quiet for a moment, looking out at all the alien faces staring at her. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but carried an undertone that made several species instinctively step back. "Because we're not like the Corac," she said. "Power isn't about taking what you want. It's about protecting what matters." An elderly Altarian representative raised one of her delicate hands. "Admiral Chen, may I ask a question that has been troubling my people?" "Of course. We called your species monsters. We feared you would be as terrible as the Corac. Were we wrong?" Chen's smile was sharp, predatory, and somehow reassuring all at once. "No, you weren't wrong. We are monsters. But here's what you didn't understand. There are different kinds of monsters." She gestured toward the space where the Corac fleet had once been. The Corac were monsters who preyed on the innocent. They used their strength to take what they wanted and destroy what they couldn't use. They were parasites. Her eyes swept across the assembly, and for a moment every being in the hall felt the weight of humanity's attention. "We're monsters too. But we're the kind of monsters that hunt other monsters. We're the apex predators who decided that our power comes with responsibility." The Chitik ambassador spoke in his whisper-soft voice. "What does that mean for the galaxy?" "It means," Chen said, "that as long as there are innocent people who need protection, humanity will be watching. We won't conquer your worlds, or demand tribute, or force you to follow our laws. But if someone decides to start another genocide, if another empire decides that might makes right, if anyone thinks they can hurt the helpless." She paused, and the silence in the hall was absolute. "They'll have to deal with us." As the ceremony ended and the representatives began to leave, small groups gathered to discuss what they had witnessed. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted completely, but not in the way anyone had expected. The Zilani would rebuild their worlds and grow stronger. The scattered remnants of the Corac Empire would have to learn new ways of living that didn't involve conquest and slavery. And somewhere in space, human ships would patrol the trade routes and monitor the communications networks, ready to respond to any threat against the innocent. In the months that followed, 3 words became common in galactic standard language. Pirates would hear them and flee. Slavers would hear them and release their captives. Tyrants would hear them and remember that there were worse things than revolution. Call the humans. It was a promise and a threat wrapped in 3 simple words. The galaxy had learned that monsters were real, but they had also learned that some monsters were on their side. And in the deep space between the stars, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the peaceful trade ships moving safely through routes that had once been plagued by pirates. Her reflection in the viewport showed tired eyes and graying hair, but also satisfaction. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a distress signal from the Rigel sector. Slavers attacking a refugee convoy." Chen didn't hesitate. "Set course for Rigel. Full speed. Full speed." As her ship turned toward the distant crisis, Chen smiled. They were monsters, just as the galaxy had always said. But they were the right kind of monsters, and the universe was a safer place because of it.